is consciousness is the physiological evolutionary result of alignment and collaboration with the truth, with presence, with what is. Consciousness is the physiological event of new neuronal evolution when one is completely authentic with one's experience and recognizes the purposefulness of one's being. The times that we're living in play a role in shaping our neurodevelopment. Those of us who are sensitive and listening to what's going on are responding to the call of these times.
Welcome back. I'm here in the heart of Northern California. As you may know, there are fires burning in Sonoma County, and many friends have been evacuated, including Jyoti and her entire community. I'm interviewing Will Scott today, who is also currently evacuated. I was staying in Marin County, which has a power blackout right now to prevent more fires. Other past guests are being affected by this currently, such as James Hanusa and upcoming guest Drew Dellinger. I have come into the city of San Francisco in order to upload this podcast. It's interesting as we talk so much about what's going to happen in the future, and yet there are so many things happening now and people affected. I have to say it's fascinating being in a wealthy, mostly white middle-class community and seeing the adaptation at play, feeling what fear and uncertainty feels like in the individual and collective body, noticing that trauma affects all, no matter what privilege is held. Noticing my own feelings of, on one hand, wanting to commit to community, candlelight, stillness, and eating all the food that is going bad from the freezer. And then on the other hand, realizing that I can travel 40 minutes and be in a place where everything is happening as usual, with some smoke in the air. And then not have to let down my clients and you by not showing up to planned meetings or putting the podcast out as usual. I wonder how many people here don't have somewhere to go that have been evacuated, don't have enough food or gas in their tanks. And then I wonder how many people are right at this moment in the world without their basic needs met, or are feeling deep fear in their bodies. We send our prayers, and we have to sit with that not being enough. I want to acknowledge with our world so small in terms of communication, media, and knowing people around the world, that we have so many situations to hold in our consciousness at any one time. From natural disasters to conflict zones to systems of poverty and oppression. And for those of us with privilege that can listen to a podcast today, that we're able to use that privilege in a way that supports equality and social justice. One way to help is to donate to UndocuFund, who are supporting the estimated 38.5 thousand undocumented immigrants living in Sonoma County that are not able to get support due to either not qualifying or fear of immigration enforcement or a lack of familiarity of the system or understanding of the English language. You can donate to them directly at www.undocufund.org. 6 days in, the Kincaid fire in Sonoma County is only 15% contained, and now the Getty fire and Tick fire in Los Angeles have affected even more people, animals, and landscapes. It's been strange to experience the lack of traffic lights, gas stations, no schools open, people not able to run their businesses and go to work, shelters full, and many with nowhere to go or sleep. And of course, the beautiful ways that community activates to support evacuees. Author Rebecca Solnit shares, "We here in California are the 5th largest economy in the world. We are also a disaster zone. This is climate chaos. This can't be the new normal." As the anxiety around these happenings and fear of the future increases, I feel that collectively, if we are not in direct trauma, if we can move out of a panic and anxiety space inside ourselves into grief that can be processed and transformed into love and action, then we are much more adept to serve at these times. This is the theme this month on Presence Collective, where we offer practices, tools, and community. You can take part from anywhere in the world, and it is a space of love, processing, and resilience. It's become a deep space of grounding connection for our members. You are so welcome to join us in this community of care and practice. And of course, you're also welcome to join us as a patron and support the making of this show that way. If you find it useful and it moves you, These donations make a big difference to us, and you can get connected to other listeners through our community spaces. For both of these, go to our website, www.thefutureisbeautiful.co, and click on either courses for Presence Collective or community for our patronage. My guest this week is Dr. Stephanie Mines, who is a neuropsychologist and the founder of Climate Change and Consciousness. Her unique understanding comes from her academic research as well as her extensive work in the field. Her stories of personal transformation have led many listeners to become deeply committed to the healing journey. Dr. Mines understands shock from every conceivable perspective. She has investigated it as a survivor, a professional, a healthcare provider, and as a trainer of staffs of institutions and agencies. Her blend of Western and Eastern modalities offers the best of both paradigms. She is devoted to ending the lineage of shock and trauma for individuals and the world. To this end, she has developed the TARA approach for the resolution of shock and trauma, which is taught internationally and is a clinically tested, comprehensive treatment design. In this episode, we explore the question, how can we help each other to become the sovereign leaders our times are calling for? I hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. I am absolutely delighted to be joined here by Stephanie. Welcome to the show. I am here in Grimsby in the northeast of England with my parents, and you are in Portland, is that right, in your home?
I'm outside of Portland in the woods, in an area about, it's almost an hour from Portland.
Wonderful. And we have been trying to have this conversation, I think, for about a year. And so I'm very grateful that we managed to align schedules and that I opened up the hard rule I had about doing all of these conversations in person so that we could be connected this way. And I have been in bed for the last 2 weeks with a very intense flu. So this is my first kind of outing, if you like. You can hear it in my voice, but it feels like it kind of somehow brings even more like the potency and the necessity of what's happening in the world right now. The process that we go through of stripping the layers and detoxifying, and that whole process really to come into being in a way where we are ready and we are strong and we are truly connected to the times that we're living in and what our role is now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amisha. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for sharing yourself in this exchange.
I once heard a friend say that when I speak about me, you hear about you. And I think that that's always stuck with me because we live in a world so often where we just present ourselves or people around us are presenting to us. And I think somewhere in that presenting, we almost can lose connection with our own being, let alone with the being that can happen between us in that real authenticity. And that word authenticity is used quite a lot as a sales word, but of course it involves that real showing up and giving of yourself as you are in any moment, because really that's all there is.
Well, this is a wonderful way to begin this conversation, and it is illustrative, really, of what it is I want to share with you and everyone listening, which is the power of connection to evolve intelligence and build our unprecedented leadership. So the collaborative way that you and I, Amisha, are communicating here and now is an example of the new iteration, the new story of what is emerging for human development in this astounding and difficult opportunity that climate change and the climate emergency that we all live in is creating for us. So how we respond together in communication, in connection, is directly contributing to the neurophysiology of human evolution, which is our assignment right now.
Wonderful. Can you share that in more detail? Like, what does that really mean?
I feel like even though I'm a neuroscientist and I have been of service in healing trauma individually and collectively for some time now, I feel that what I learned in the initial forum of climate change and consciousness in April of this year, that was really the threshold of the evolution of that vision, is the magnitude that occurs when people come together. I am someone, for instance, who has preferred to live my life really quite independently. I'm not a joiner or someone who ever thought of herself as a leader in a collective sense. I have been catapulted through the guidance that came to me to deliver climate change and consciousness into a leadership position. And through that leadership, which is entirely collaborative, I am the recipient of an enormous amount of neurodevelopment. So I feel like I'm studying even myself in this process, but I'm also witnessing it in all the people I'm in contact with at Climate Change and Consciousness in April in Findhorn. We experienced some stunning kernels of truth about what has to happen in terms of human development to meet the climate emergency. Several of those things require human development. So one of them, I would say, is the recognition of the centrality of the indigenous voice and the discovery of our own indigeneity, our own capacity to find indigenous connection with the natural world. And the other is about the movement of wealth, the capacity of those of us who have been in a privileged position to be able to share those resources with those the least responsible for the climate crisis. So those two major kernels that were presented in boldface at Climate Change and Consciousness, not resolved there, hardly. How could issues of such magnitude be resolved in 7 days, but exposed, you might say, stood naked in front of us? I, as the vision holder of Climate Change and Consciousness, have the responsibility of embodying the manifestation of the further development that occurs when we fearlessly step into those issues, which I'm doing. I feel that I'm fearlessly doesn't mean that I don't have fear. I have a lot of fear about these things. I have a lot of fear about doing all of this, but fearlessly in that I'm doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. Even trembling and shaking inside and wondering, how could I possibly be saying these things? But going forward anyway, on the somatic level, knowing that I am meant to do this and the qualification is in me doing it. So I am fearlessly stepping into the issues of racism within the climate movement. I am fearlessly stepping into the issues of giving and wealth sharing and generosity and the habituation that keeps us attached to what we think is our security, the letting go of those false security blankets and surrendering to the freedom of selfhood and integrity, which is our true security. I'm fearlessly stepping into unprecedented leadership. Thankfully, I have wonderful models like my beloved friend Vandana Shiva, who imparts to me through her being what it means to be an unprecedented leader, what it means to be somatically and energetically a messenger of hope to others. And I believe that this neurophysiological evolution that I'm experiencing and that I seek to support others in experiencing is entirely organic, and that it is meant to occur, and it has to occur in relationship.
Beautiful. I wonder if you can explain a little bit more about what you mean by kind of showing up on an energetic and somatic level.
Beautiful question, one that I struggle with on a daily basis. So I can only answer that question, Amisha, in a profoundly personal way. I have to tell you what that means for me personally. I am someone who did not have an easy start in life, and I don't really need to go into the details of that. I can say that the sum of the messages that I received in that difficult developmental time for me was that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, and that I would be lucky to have anything. I would be lucky. And in the terms of the poor immigrant family that I came from, this would look something like I'd be lucky to have a good husband. I'd be lucky to have an income. I would be lucky to have nice clothes. It's very unlikely that I would have any of those things because there's something fundamentally wrong with me, and I would have to misrepresent myself or grovel or hide my inadequacies in order to have anything in life whatsoever. So the message delivered to me was always one of inadequacy and incompetency. And I was an intensely imaginative and creative little girl who got very confused by these contradictions because there was a wealth of inspiration welling up inside of me all the time. And I was continually being instructed that I was worthless. And I was instructed that way in physical ways, beatings and abuses that have a dramatic impact on the nervous system. I'm very excited to share with you and the world that I have transcended that. But when those messages are delivered at primal times of evolution in one's personal life, and they're delivered somatically, they're delivered through the signaling system of connective tissue in the human body, and they're repeated. One is catapulted very often into mirroring relationships. When that is your initial experience, you then return to those kind of relationships of your own volition later, simply because the habituation is ingrained within your neuronal firing. So finally, having woven myself into a new story for Stephanie, I hear now only the muted echoes, the whisperings of what used to be screaming voices within me. But I still have to overcome those on a daily basis. And all the practices that I do, the self-healing practices, the energetic practices, the yoga, the meditation that I do, brings me to the place where on a regular basis, I reassert the truth of who I really am, my essential self, every day. I come back to knowing the difference between the intergenerational necessity of the lie that I was fed with great compassion and humility and respect for my ancestry. And I come into the embodiment of who I really am and what I'm here to do at this exquisite crucible for humanity. And I do it. And in the process of doing it, like having this conversation, I am transformed. I can feel, because I've taught myself to track these things, I can feel the neuroevolution occurring. I can feel through my now educated signaling system in my connective tissue the power of you and I having come together, Amisha, at this precise moment. Not any of the other moments when we tried to make it happen. But this precise moment in your life and in my life. So, just this morning, as I was contemplating the possibility of this occurring, this meeting, these understandings about the organic nature of human evolution and how all the years that I've spent in the resolution of trauma has prepared me to be able to say to people, regardless of what obstacles you're facing in terms of your own personal life, you can be certain that you are meant to be here and that you are meant to make a unique contribution for the continuity of human civilization and the children of the future. You can be certain that your unique gifts, whatever they might be, will flourish. And through your willingness, even if you're afraid, to fearlessly step into that, to take the next step, even if you don't know what that next step looks like, to take the next step and let the collaborative experience of taking that next step cause the firing of the next neurological event that is meant to heighten your consciousness. So what I can say now is consciousness is the physiological evolutionary result of alignment and collaboration with the truth, with presence, with what is. Consciousness is the physiological event of new neuronal evolution when one is completely, to use that word again, authentic with one's experience and recognizes the purposefulness of one's being.
Beautiful. So the way to show up at this time, and I resonate with this from my own life and my own work, is to show up in that kind of deepest recognition of our soul, of why we're here, of what we have to contribute. And if we're all able to do that at this time, then we're able to make a step forward as humanity.
Absolutely. And we need help to do this. I need help. I need colleagues. I need friends. And there is some sorting, some differentiation that occurs, and that may take the form of finding your tribe, finding those people who can most readily, most compassionately resonate with you, who get you, the people who get you, with nothing disparaging about those who don't. But we have to be in community with those who get us and who we also perceive in that same way, so that the relational mirroring that occurs supports that evolution. So finding our tribe and as gracefully as possible, letting go of those who don't do that for us. It's just an orientation step. I see it as a dance movement. It's like, I'm not going to move there. I'm going to move here, because here, if I move, I'm going to have expanded possibility. My dance will be more expressive. If I move there, I'm going to be constrained and crippled. So it's a natural choice to move in the direction where this neuronal evolution can flourish, and say no. It just has to be clear. Say no to where it won't, because relationship and collaboration is critical for this neuroevolution. And I definitely am speaking here as a neuroscientist, as someone who has worked, as I mentioned, with trauma and development. But what I want to say is that I also am developing structures to support people in doing this, because we need that. And for those who are on the brink or tottering in the leadership choice, in the activism choice, I am creating structures and avenues and support systems and resources to help this sorting occur in the optimum way. And that becomes part of the evolution of climate change and consciousness, which is an embodied, optimistic, visionary community of people in all walks of life, really, who come together in support of specific actions, but also in the general intention to heighten neuroresilience.
Beautiful. Can you explain what you mean by neuroresilience?
Yes. So the brain has incredible plasticity, and this has now been proven multiple times scientifically. There was, and in some cases still is, an old story of development, neurological development, that is stopping at a certain juncture of life, at a certain developmental phase. And that has now been disproven, that the capacity of the brain to evolve and have new neuronal activity, new synaptical connections to come out of habituation is ever present. However, it won't be ever present if it's not stimulated. So the stimulation, which incorporates relationship, that is necessary, has to be sought and repeated. It has to be desired. It has to be, there's discipline. So one has to have a craving for it or a yearning for it. And if one does, then that craving will be met. And there has to be some outreach for that. So that's, I think, also part of your question, the answer that I was formulating to your question of how do I show up energetically, ready to face these challenges in this very challenging world we're in right now. And how I've learned that when I engage fearlessly, that it's not about me doing something for other people. It's about me being part of a flow of what is out there to cultivate neuroresilience. I feel very fortunate, but I think everybody can be this fortunate that if we step into this path of purpose and unique contribution, we're given so much to promote neuroresilience, which is this plasticity that allows us to think in new ways, allows us to have new insights, innovative ideas, to shapeshift out of our idea of ourselves and become what we are meant to be. So as people evolve, they have new styles, new ways of being, new responses to experience. Coming out of repetitive or rigidified behaviors is the indication of neuroresilience. So those who are rigid, who are repetitive, who are committed to an old story, even when it's not working have sacrificed that neuroresilience out of a feeling of control and the falsity of that control. And it shows in their structures. Usually it shows in their communication. It shows in definitely in their interactions with other people. So neuroresilience is a choice.
It's interesting because as you're kind of sharing all of this, and I'm feeling into the year that I've had and how many friendships have sort of ended, and this kind of process of finding the people that you're vibrating on the same level with, that where you can do this work together. And sometimes it's not as black and white as you might think. Like, it might seem like, oh, this is like a kind of friendship, relationship, community where that feels like a yes, where I can express. And then you kind of realize, oh no, it's not. It just kind of looked like that. And it's quite a complicated process, or at least it can be. And it's not always an easy one. And so I kind of want to just highlight that for our friends that are listening, that courage that we're talking about, that fearlessness, where of course you may still be afraid and you may still have all kinds of emotional responses, but you allow yourself to be guided by a kind of greater movement or force inside of you that shows you the way. And I feel very strongly, for example, that this flu that I'm working through at the moment is a kind of physical detoxification of a big inner process shift that I've just been through, of letting go of a whole bunch of stories and some deep patterning and some attachments. And then it's like it has to kind of burn out of my body. Yeah, just that these processes are not always so easy to go through. But that's why if we have each other and we have awareness of the reality of what these processes are like, we can hold each other in this evolution.
I'm really glad that you're bringing this up, and it references back to me something that I've been noticing, but it never would have occurred to me to talk about it, except that you're bringing it into the forefront. As I have moved out of identifying myself as a trauma therapist, a trauma theorist, someone who works with that issue primarily, with people more into the role of climate activist and leader in terms of human evolution, I have changed the nature of my relationships, and I've changed even the way that I do my work. My professional identity has shifted enormously in a way that is unprecedented. I don't see other trauma therapists incorporating the issue of climate so radically into their approach to what trauma is and how we can resolve it. But to me, it's inseparable. So I'm standing, very much in a field that hasn't been plowed ever before. That, I'm sure there are some others who are standing in similar fields, but not many. And students, people who have worked with me for years, people with whom I had conversations on these topics, they're gone because they're not entering into this new field with me. Some are, but many are not. And I have new friends, and I'm having new conversations that I never had before. And there's a loss. And sometimes it's very difficult. I absolutely go through, relationships are so important to me, Amisha. Relationships have a huge impact on me. So I can spend hours thinking about some of those people who I'm no longer in dialogue with, who aren't contacting me anymore, and who I'm not reaching out to because they're not part of what's going on in my world now. But I think about them. I miss them. I wonder what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, given the background that I have, that I shared briefly with you, my first thought is, what did I do wrong? I should have brought them along with me. How did I fail them? How did I make this mistake of not giving them the tools to come with me where I was going? It doesn't come easily to me to just let go of them and let go of that as the old story.
And do you think part of that is to do with the intimidation of what is happening at this time around climate and what it is calling forth in us? Do you think that there's a kind of connection to why, for some people, they just want to kind of tune out of it, and why others get really kind of activated and want to step up?
What a great question. I think you're absolutely right. And what came to me as you were asking that question, and this relates to climate change and consciousness. What is that consciousness piece? It's a spiritual calling, Amisha. I was called into this role by a spiritual event that I experienced somatically. I experienced it in my body. I identified it as somatic. It was a powerful sensory experience that continues to be a powerful sensory experience from which I cannot turn. So I am wedded to this powerful sensory guidance, and I will never be separated from it. I will say, and this could be a huge leap for many people listening, but for me, it feels very clear that it's the call of the mother. That's how I identify it in my body. This is the call of the mother. This is the call of the great mother. This is the call of my mother, the earth, for whom I have been separated for so long, and who's calling me home to her. And the power of that may not be felt by everyone. And there may be some who can turn away from that power, who can deafen themselves to it, blind themselves to it, be distracted. It's a somatic call. It's a call of the heart. It's the call of the highest, I would say, neurological possibility, which is the possibility of moving from I to we without feeling you're losing anything, and the possibility of being part of a global family and a global purpose.
And with that, there's a lot of people that are called to show up in this movement. There's a lot of eco-anxiety, eco-grief happening. I've noticed myself that even with my one-to-one clients that I do this subconscious patterning energy work with, that I've had more and more clients showing up with fear around the future and around climate. I've been questioning myself quite a lot about how helpful that is to be connected to this fear of the future. If that then sends us into a kind of a state of panic, of fight or flight, of a trauma response, then maybe that is not going to allow us as humans to take the next step forward. And the way that the media coverage now, there finally is coverage around climate, but it's all quite scary. And it's the way that the media have given Greta this huge stage, and there are now these kids all over the world saying we're not going to have a future. And that's a lot for a child to bear, for all of these children to bear. It's a lot for all the parents to bear. And sometimes I wonder if it's helpful and what that's kind of creating. So I'd be really curious to hear your kind of take on, for me, I think there's a nuance in there somewhere of how to rise into this moment as this evolutionary path, or there's a space where, because hearts are open and people care, that we can get really caught in the panic and the fear and the kind of hysteria of it. To me, they're kind of different paths.
Thank you. So the art of deep listening and the art of reflecting on how we are being educated personally every day to be deep listeners for those stuck in that fear is the way I would say we are being prepared to be unprecedented leaders. So as I was describing to you the struggle that I go through every day to step into my full essential self and my positive and engaged energetic presence, and the struggle you shared with me about what you have been going through with this flu, I put quote marks around the flu that you've been experiencing. I would say that this is training, that we're in training. I'm in training every morning, between about 5:30 and 8 o'clock. Then I sort through all this stuff, sometimes 4 to 9. It varies a little bit, but I got to come out of it before 10 a.m. And I do organically, because I'm really no good at pretending. So if I don't come out of it authentically, I'm going to show up with the truth. That's just, I'm transparent. But those hours and this process that you shared with me, Amisha, that you have just been going through, you're still going through, this is preparation. Because as I was listening to you telling me about this, the path that you followed and where you landed in your essential self, that was training. You landed in alignment. That was the purpose of the training, to show you that no matter how challenging the circumstances, physical symptoms, feelings of emotional loss and betrayal, confusion, disorientation, feelings of weakness, despair, self-doubt, we have to wander through those swampy grounds. And how wonderful if there's a deep listening self within us, or companion or midwife or fellow traveler who can listen to us and help us come out exactly where you came out, Amisha. You came out whole. You came out as Amisha. That's the victory. And the truth is, we've all done that, and we're going to have to keep doing it. And the more we do it, the better we get at it, the faster the process is, and the more we can be of service to others.
Thank you. Just to give our friends listening a little bit of context, because we had part of this conversation before we pressed record, but I was sharing that, I won't go into the whole story and the details, but something that's been going on in my life for maybe 4 years kind of came to all kinds of strange culminations over the course of the last 7-8 months. And I had, just a couple of days before this flu came on, I had an initiation on a more psychic level that happened through the night. And I sort of received a lot of information and also had to go through a certain I guess initiation is just the best word. But I had to know what to do myself. There's no one telling you what to do. You just have to work it out. And then when I landed, I felt just a huge shift in my inner world and my perception of reality. Yeah. And then after 2 days of playing with my very charming 2 and 4-year-old nieces, I then woke up with this flu. And it felt like the shift on the inner level was so strong that a lot of information needed to clear out from the physical level in order to make space for it. And so we were talking actually at the beginning about how often, and when I say beginning, I mean before we pressed record, about how often we live in this world where there's this perception of like, you know, you're either like happy and positive and amazing, or like things are going wrong. And for me, I've just noticed and experienced in my own life and in anyone else that's human that's ever been honest that it doesn't work like that. That you go through these, you called them waves, I call them cycles. Like there's always a kind of process. And I know for a lot of people that are on a path of consciousness, for a lot of my friends, you know, they actually for a number of years now, they've been like, everything's getting, it's like faster and more dense, and there's like more showing up and more kind of detoxification and more challenges and more growth. And that feels like it happens on the personal level as well as on the collective level. And I think that connection between those personal processes and the collective processes, and actually how in one way that is how the collective shift is happening through many individuals going through these big shifts. And so when we talk about it and when we find each other and we unite with each other, then we feel a little bit less like alone. and I guess like you said, like there's something wrong.
So I want, this is so beautiful, and I want to link it back to your original question, was the question about the fear, the magnitude of fear that people are feeling and the sense that young people are expressing, and the suicide rate for youth globally is epidemic. So this is very destructive, enormous fear and grief and loss that's pervading in the environment. And your question about how do we handle that? And my response was this deep listening. So I want to mirror back to you, Amisha, that you have developed the ability to listen deeply to yourself. You had to have followed these waves or these cycles that you described to me, you know, where you dropped into the feeling of confusion or the feeling of loss or the feeling of betrayal or whatever those feelings were. You listened deeply to yourself, and you took these days that you were ill to continue listening, and you listened to the end. You're still listening. It's not over. You're still listening, but you're coming out on the other side because your body, your sensory experience is resonating that you're landing in a truth. And the truth is your integrity. The truth is you are who you are. The truth is that you respect yourself and that you honor yourself and that you have purpose and you have resource. So you're landing on the other side of what you have detoxified from through your own deep listening to yourself. I feel that those people who are so frightened, justifiably frightened, grief-stricken, they need this deep listening. They need to be listened to deeply, and they need subtle, non-invasive support in coming out to this place where they will come out, which is the place of alignment and the place of purposefulness and the place of reclamation of one's own beauty and purpose.
Hmm. Thank you.
That's, I believe, how we get to unprecedented leadership. So I am fully endorsing the leadership trainings that are occurring around specific projects, that some of which are just incredible, like Project Drawdown, for instance. Many of the incredible projects that are being launched through incredible, wonderful global organizations like Pachamama Alliance and Bioneers. These are remarkable programs building leadership for projects, and I endorse those. But I want to add this leadership for human development that supports people in being listened to very deeply, so that they also find not just their outer project, but their inner alignment, their inner purposefulness, their inner neuroresilience that is really about their destiny. And that often means trauma resolution, which is what I'm trained in. But what I am learning in this climate changing world is that whole process becomes expedited through this incredible somatic presence of the mother, this incredible somatic presence of purposefulness. And the times that we're living in play a role in shaping our neurodevelopment. And those of us who are sensitive and listening to what's going on are responding to the call of these times. I think you are. I think the process that you went through, even though it was deeply personal, involved your health, involves people you know and how they impacted you. But I would say it was a process it was a cauldron of alchemical transformation for you to claim your unprecedented leadership. And you have it, Amisha. You have unprecedented leadership. You've shaped this call.
Thank you. I mean, I feel that actually everyone that is listening to this conversation has it. And those that I know, the patrons and the members of Presence Collective, like that I get together with regularly, I feel like they are all going through these kind of processes and these initiations. Yeah, this is the work. Well, it's part of the work, right? But a big part of it.
A big part of it. It's a part of it. It may not be everybody's initiation, but for many it is. And I want to recognize it. I want to listen to it deeply. And I don't think there's any other way, really. And when I do, I evolve.
Hello, this is Amisha. We are just taking a little break from the conversation here. On behalf of myself and the team, I want to say thank you for being part of creating a beautiful future. We make this for you, so that we will all have the vision, wisdom, and activism we need at this time to weave a new narrative. Can you help us with this? You can do that by making a monthly donation to the podcast to cover our costs. Just the equivalent of a fair trade banana you might eat or a chai latte you might drink whilst you listen to this will make a huge difference to us. Head to www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community to become a monthly patron. And the other thing is to tell your friends about this podcast so they can tune in too. Send them a message or post on social media and let them know what you love about it. And whilst you're at it, leave us a review. And now, back to the conversation. Thank you for your loving beauty. And for those listening that don't know where to start in terms of an actual practice, I really resonate with what you were saying about the amount of hours you spend in the morning. And one beautiful Swedish woman I was having a session with, she was saying to me, you know, especially in these times, like, your personal practice is so important. And I asked her about hers, and she said, well, you know, I do 5 hours, like from 5 a.m. till 10 a.m. And it involves walking in nature and meditating and writing and making beautiful food. But like, it's all a process. And then from 10, I start my calls, my interaction, and this call that you use your practice to be able to show up at a certain level. And I think it's different for everyone because everyone has a different set of trauma, sensitivity, purpose that means that they need more of something or less of something, or, you know, it's not prescriptive, the same thing for everyone. But what are some of the key practices that you've discovered through your work that can really support people on this process?
The key practice, one of the key practices that I sustain and have for quite some time now is an energy medicine practice that I teach. And that's available through my program, the Tara Approach. And that is a really quite simple, hands-on practice that can be done at the self-care level with relatively little training, and then, of course, can be taken to higher and higher levels of detailed intervention with the self and with others on the level of the human nervous system. This is an ancient system that I learned from the woman who brought it from Japan to America, who's now deceased, Mary Eno Burmeister. The practice is called Jinshin, and I've incorporated it into the Tara approach. So the applied touch system that I've developed that is particularly designed to interact with the human nervous system when it has been conditioned by trauma, which is basically everybody, is called Jinshin Tara, but it's all under the umbrella of the Tara approach. And I've clinically tested this in a variety of circumstances. It's highly effective and very easy to learn. That is absolutely a sustaining practice for me. My own, at this point, eclectic form of meditation is another sustaining practice, educated in various traditions. And I consider myself, from a spiritual standpoint, quite universal. So I synthesize the wonderful teachers who have helped me find my truth and empower myself to do my meditation and my yoga and various ways in which I move and dance in those early hours to come into alignment. So there has been for a very long time now, a sustained practice of energy medicine, movement, meditation, and writing is another enduring spiritual practice for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. When you shared that everyone has trauma, I wonder if you can just give us a little kind of understanding of what that means and the ways in which trauma might show up in our lives.
Yeah. So one of my most popular books is called We Are All in Shock. And that book, which answers your question, but also gives some of these applied touch resources as well for meeting this universal condition. I understand that book, which I wrote many years ago, differently since climate change and consciousness and my conversations with the remarkable Vandana Shiva, we have all been educated out, or miseducated might be a better way to say it, out of our indigeneity. We have all been, the words that Vandana would use, we have all been indoctrinated into the fossil fuel brain. So that is I don't mean to be promoting conspiracy theory. This is simply part of the Western world that we have been led away from our individual unique passion and our connectedness. So we have been educated into separation. And that is really, I would say, the root of all evil. The living of life in separation and the promotion of that separation through stuff, the promotion of that separation through pretense, that promotion of sham power as opposed to the indigenous power that is our birthright. So in that regard, we are all in shock. And Mother is calling us home. Enough is enough. It's time to come back into connection. And that is why the deep listening is the simple intervention for unprecedented leadership, to let your fear be heard. Exactly what you said, Amisha. Come together with each other. And those of us like you, like me, who have been repeatedly initiated into staying in relationship to ourselves and coming out the other side over and over and over again. It's not like there's an end to it. That is the spiritual practice, really. Mm-hmm. We are closer to stepping into the I that is we. And we're being called to do that for those who need to be heard in their fear and despair. Our capacity to do that is creating unprecedented leadership. So we all have to be leaders, just as you so rightly said. Everybody listening here is being called. There's a leader in every chair where everyone is sitting right now. There's a leader everywhere in our midst. We are the leaders we have been waiting for.
So what's next for climate change and consciousness? So you had the gathering at Findhorn earlier this year, and I was following some of it online, watching some of the talks, and poignant week as well, because it was, a big week. And it was the week that Polly left her body, Polly Higgins, and after the first kind of rebellion week of Extinction Rebellion. So it was this potent moment in time. What did it feel like to be gathered at that time? And what would you say are the fruits that came from that? And where is it moving towards now?
As the originator, founder, and vision holder of climate change and consciousness, I would say that time in April was a great exploration of what needs to come after the event. And I am happy, thrilled to report that the community of climate change and consciousness, the highly diverse, intergenerational, multi-talented community of climate change and consciousness, is alive and well. And we have a platform, a Mighty Networks platform, that we're now about to open to a larger community. We're ready to expand our conversations and our resources. We have percolated some incredible projects. There's a whole category called Walking the Land. These are from our Indigenous representatives. And this is an example of the wealth sharing. So the white members of our community are supporting the Indigenous projects throughout the world, in the Amazon, in Australia, in Aotearoa, in the Amazon, in Latin America. And we are also creating the foundation for leadership training in a program I'm calling Groundswell, which has this aspect of deep listening and building unprecedented leadership. And we are preparing for Climate Change and Consciousness Norway 2021, which will be in Oslo in May 2021. The centerpiece will be this movement of wealth from the rich north to the global south. But as part of that 4-day event, it will be in the middle of May, probably May 25th through the 28th. Those are our tentative dates, but they will likely be the final date. The same elements that were present at the April 2019 event will be there in the form of the arts. There will be absolutely Indigenous leadership there, including the Sami, Indigenous people of Scandinavia. And that's unfolding. And those who are drawn to being part of this community are welcome to contact me. That's the easiest way, is through the Tara Approach website. You're welcome to reach out to me.
Wonderful. Well, I will definitely be there in Oslo, having, not quite made it to Findhorn in physical presence. But and we actually have a woman from the Sami coming up on the show as well.
That's awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's kind of, I think for people that live in Europe, often this idea of the indigenous people of the European lands feels very distant and something that's not so easy to connect to. And I know that for a lot of the community of The Future is Beautiful, we've been having a lot of conversations about that and about like reconnecting to indigenous ways, no matter where in the world you're from, or, that it doesn't always have to be something that you go far away for. Yeah, so that's very powerful.
Everything you said is important, Amisha, that we find our own indigeneity, that we don't have to travel far. That is important in terms of carbon, but it's also important in terms of seeing what we can do right where we are.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Stephanie?
I want to share how touched I am by our connection in this call. That you and I resonated in the ways that we resonated, that we met the moment, and that the beauty of our relationship has opened like this rose that I'm looking at that is just starting to bud. And that says it all, really.
Beautiful. It's like, it felt kind of logical to not do the call today because I'm trying to rest a bit more. But then when I felt into it, I was like, no, this is the right thing to do. And I think this is the process of deep listening, where it can be tricky sometimes, because sometimes you get a no or you get a yes, but it's like you have to look a little bit deeper to find the actual answer, and the one that's not coming from either the habituated patterns, the trauma patterns, or the conditioned patterns. And for me, that's, I think, part of this great art that I feel like I'm learning. And this kind of sense that things aren't always what they seem. And so that development of trust of one's intuition also really involves a kind of deep understanding of the patterns in which we're formed, so that we know that sometimes something feels really great, but it only feels great because of the familiarity of the wound and the pain. And sometimes things feel not so comfortable, but actually they're a real gateway. And then sometimes it can be the opposite. So you have to really listen well.
I think deep listening sums it all up. I feel so wealthy with the richness of my deep listening to you. So I really want to thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate this so much. I have one more question, which is something around the difference between intuition and spiritual guidance.
Yeah, that I did a TED Talk, which you can easily find. Just Google Stephanie Mine's TED Talk, which is about this, actually, the difference between intuition and spiritual guidance. And the answer is, again, deep listening, but deep listening on the sensory level and learning to identify alignment, learning to identify when your body is coming into its own truth. And I credit my many years of energy medicine practice in helping me refine this deep listening to my own sensory experience. We have to do that differentiation. We have to be listening deeply, not only to everything that's going on around us, but we have to be listening very deeply to what is happening in our body. So how do we tell the difference between something that's pulling us out of truth and something that's deepening us in truth? The answer is sensory. And I don't know that I can answer the question for others, but I know that I can answer it for myself, because I can feel the difference in my physical sensation. And that inevitably, as you described in your story of what happened to you over this initiation that you've been through, what you described to me as you tracked your movement through the various emotions you were experiencing into alignment, you were tracking that for yourself and you knew the difference. So supporting people in being able to do that differentiation by listening deeply to them as the product of our deep listening to ourselves helps each individual answer that question for themselves. What is the difference between intuition and spiritual guidance? When the movement from I to we is complete, there is no difference. Intuition is spiritual guidance. But we have to know that we're there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that knowledge is sensory, it's somatic.
It's interesting because that differentiation is often kind of more about, say, mind or intuition, but you're differentiating intuition and spiritual guidance. And I guess I just want you to clarify then what intuition means from your perspective.
Yeah, so intuition can be more about I than it is about we. The spiritual guidance serves a higher purpose. So my intuition, and I don't know if this is the ultimate definition of intuition, but you might say what commonly might pass for intuition could also be a projection, could also be a goal I want to achieve, could also be a manipulation, could also be something from the unconscious that one feels percolates up in the form of what you might describe as intuition, like the phrases that I've heard from many people, like what's coming to me or the feeling I have is, and that is unexplored. It's not necessarily impersonal. It can be very personal. So spiritual guidance as intuition or coming through an individual serves a higher purpose than intuition might present itself to be serving. So an example would be, and this is a common experience for me. So when you and I were talking and you were describing how nourished you are by doing these interviews. So I strongly felt compelled, and I think I said it, but I tempered it somewhat because I've educated myself about this. I felt strongly compelled to say, oh, then that's your destiny. You know, if this nourishes you, and I said something to that effect, if this nourishes you, then this is what you should be doing. But it felt like intuition. It felt like I was intuitively feeling that this was a path for you. But thank God I have a higher listening skill now. And there was a wonderful voice that said, you don't know that. You don't know that that's a path for her. You would like that to be a path for her. You would like to feel that you know that, but it's her choice whether that is her path or not. So I stepped back from it somewhat. So to me, that would be the difference. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, it kind of speaks to something that I feel there's a lot of at the moment. As more and more people are becoming interested in spirituality and how spirituality is also part of this capitalist world that we live in, and how the ego is obviously still present in all humans, and it needs to be. There's a lot of people that you can go to, whether you pay them or not, and they will tell you, oh, I'm getting this. Like, I feel like you should do this, or like, don't do this, or do, and yeah, don't do this, book that flight, don't go there, break up with this person. I'm just feeling like this. I'm getting this thing. And it's like, there's a big art in learning how to not take on all of these intuitions that people have for you. And that is where real sovereignty comes in. And it's kind of like, maybe at a different time, or if you hang out in different circles, there'll be a lot of people saying, you should do this, you should do that. And that kind of should sort of often comes from a more conditioned societal worldview. You should do this. This is the path for you. And then now we have in the more alternative space, this more like intuitive, oh, this and this. And what I found to be quite interesting is that lots of different intuitive people will say something very different about the exact same situation. And so then you know that is not truth. It still has a flavor, a sense of opinion, some kind of agenda. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad quote unquote agenda, but there's still an agenda. And I think I like that when you say about spiritual guidance, because when it happens to you, you really know. And it does feel like a opening that's happening on a personal level that is deeply connected to the collective level. Whereas sometimes our intuitions can just be, they can also be quite frivolous too.
Well, they can be manipulative. They can be projections. They can be coming from, as you said, an agenda and serving the purpose of that person who's saying those shoulds to you. And they can say it very, very convincingly. And I would categorize all of those kind of projected intuitions that the person might feel is truly an intuition. But I would classify that as colonialism. So to me, that was another huge wake up at climate change and consciousness at Findhorn, was witnessing the common behavior of colonialism in the white world that is actually rewarded, that capacity to take charge, that capacity to tell other people what they should do or what would be really good for them. That's colonialist. That's entirely colonialist behavior. And it can be applauded because people are looking for others to tell them what to do. And so they become slaves to that colonialism. That's not unprecedented leadership. Unprecedented leadership does not tell other people what to do. Unprecedented leadership evokes the sovereignty and empowerment and alignment of the individual. The difference between learning how to impart unprecedented leadership and training people to be a climate activist for a project is that unprecedented leadership will evoke in you the path that you are meant to follow, not the project that I'm working on. And that's actually what I love about this call, because when somebody says, I want to interview you, the first thing that comes to mind is this is an opportunity to talk about what I'm selling, to talk about, even if what I'm selling is not for money, but it's my package. It's climate change and consciousness, or the Tara approach, or whatever it might be that I'm selling. And this call was much more than that. You shaped it, Amisha. You shaped it that way.
Thank you. I'm just really taken by what you said about colonialism. And as there is much more awareness around a decolonization process, like an inner decolonization process that many people are having to go on at the moment. And the linking of that with kind of intuition and spiritual manipulation is quite interesting. I'm having quite a profound moment just integrating these kind of two things, because part of this experience that I was sharing with you about this process that I've been going through has been around spiritual manipulation and the misuse of psychic power and control. Like in colonialism, part of the process is to strip a people away of the connection to what they already have, with a sense of convincing them that you have something better to offer. And that process that I feel many of us are going on, of the decolonization of our minds, of our hearts, of our consciousness, as well as, of course, of our land and our systems and our economics, is this process of realizing that we have already what we need. We always had it. We got kind of tricked somehow to think that we didn't, and that we needed to focus on these other things. And for me, I don't know if like I said, I've not really spoken to anyone for 2 weeks because I've been in this flu process. So I hope this is making sense for our friends listening. But it's like this sense that the inner process and that spiritual process of reclaiming sovereignty is actually very similar to the outer process of these systems that we're seeing not working, breaking down, and this reclaiming of our land and of the wider humanity and on our future potential.
Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. I think, you're describing that you were in a flu process. I think you were on a retreat and you've come out with enormous clarity. And that's exactly correct. This understanding of that's what Vandana meant. Fossil fuel brain. That's a colonized brain. We have been complicit in being colonized. You've described it beautifully.
Wow, thank you. So powerful. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time. And yeah, I feel like on a personal level, that sense of this conversation happening at the perfect moment in my own journey. And also I know that the day that we share this out, it will have the same impact for those listening. And I've just really appreciated this time together.
It goes both ways, Amisha. What a joy this time has been, and what a joy to get to know you.
Thank you. More coming.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
And hopefully we'll all be together in 2021 in Norway.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mentioned in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?